Extra special thanks to Cincy Music for co-hosting My Favorite Album is Terrible. For the best in what Cincinnati's amazing local music scene has to offer, be sure to follow them on Instagram at Cincy Music, that's Cincy with a Y, on Facebook at cincymusic.com, also Cincy with a Y, and on their official website, www.cincymusic.com. Here's the show. All right, hi everybody. Welcome to My Favorite Album is Terrible. My name's Kent Mulcahy with the Cincinnati Public Library, and what we're going to do here every other Thursday at 8 o'clock, we are going to talk about records by bands or artists that fans or critics just absolutely seemed to hate. Now, I want to make an important distinction. We are not talking about guilty pleasures. To me, a guilty pleasure is something that, you listen to a lot and you love it, but deep down inside, it's probably not good. That's not what we're talking about. Any album chosen by anyone to discuss, they truly love the album, and they also think it's a good representation of that artist. So we're not talking about guilty pleasures. So what's going to happen is, each episode, a host is going to pick an album to discuss, to defend against the world and prove everyone wrong. Then a guest, or in some cases guests, are going to have to listen to that entire album and discuss it with the host. But the twist is, no matter how they felt about the album, if they hated every second of it, the guests are not allowed to say anything negative about that album, which could lead to one of three things. Maybe they'll listen to it, and you know what? They'll be convinced. They'll be like, you know what? This album was actually pretty good. I was wrong. And then they will join in with the host and take on the rest of the world. I have a feeling that's not going to happen tonight. The second thing that could happen is maybe they'll listen to it and they didn't really care for it, but they found some things that they did like. Maybe they'll be able to highlight some silver linings. The third thing that could happen is the guest listens to it, hates it, can't find a single nice thing to say about it. If that's the case, they still have to talk about it with the host. So what they can do is they can find creative ways to thrash it that sound positive. So maybe some snarky, backhanded, passive-aggressive compliments is what we're going for. But at any time, the host, if they feel like the guest has made a negative comment, the host can overrule that comment and then demand that the guest rephrase the offending comment to something that at least sounds positive. So that's how this is going to work. By the way, everything that we talk about is going to be free for you with your library card. Most of what we talk about here is going to come from Freegal and Hoopla, which are our streaming and downloadable music services. There's just an amazing amount of music there. I do not pay for a subscription to any music services because I get more than enough here. But if the notion strikes us, we might dig into our vast, vast collection of vinyl. Either way, every episode, check the comments for links for you to directly listen to everything that we talk about for free with your library card. And speaking of the comments section, please jump in and join us. I want this to be an interactive thing. So if anyone's watching and you have opinions about this, jump in and comment along. But remember, the rules apply to you. If you didn't like this album, you have to phrase it in a way that is positive, and I will absolutely jump in and make people rephrase things. If you have an album you think we should talk about, drop that in the comments as well. We'd be happy to discuss some of your guys' picks in a future episode. Also, very important, give us a like and a share, especially if you're enjoying what you're watching. And if you know anyone who else is into music who you'd like to be a part of this, please give us a share and help us spread the word. This is definitely a, the more the merrier situation. Okay, so what album are we discussing tonight? And this is an album that I picked, by the way, right up front. I picked this album. I like this album. I don't care what anyone says. And also, I'm super excited because this is going to be our metal episode. Now, before our guest comes on and debates me as to whether this album is metal or not, this is our metal episode. 99% of what I listen to is like death metal, grindcore, stuff like that, which don't get to talk about often on here. So I'm very excited to be able to talk about metal. So what does metal mean in this case? Tonight, we are going to discuss Load by Metallica. Load was released in 1996. So what can we say about Load? Well, the first thing I'm going to say is that it's available to you through our Hoopla service. That's the one you would go to. Again, check the links in the comments section to listen to that. Load was released on June 4th, 1996. And, I don't think I need to introduce Metallica. Whether you're a metal fan or not, you know who Metallica is. And the album before this one was the Black Album, which is literally one of the biggest albums of all time, and I know what the word literally means. I mean, whether metal or not, Black Album was just massive. We're talking record sales up there with Guns N' Roses, Garth Brooks, Shania Twain, Pink Floyd. Just one of the biggest albums ever. And also to put this in context with what was happening around that time, also released in June of 1996 was Jay-Z's first album, Reasonable Doubt, Nada Surf's High-Low. Remember that song, Popular? Still a good song, and Nada Surf is still great and putting out good music. Beck's Odelay came out then, as well as Primitive Radio God's album Rocket, with the song Standing Outside a Broken Phone Booth with Money in My Hand. So there's two things that's working against load here. One, how do you follow up one of the biggest albums of all time? And two, how do you fit into the landscape of what's popular at that time? One-hit wonders or the quirkiness of, say, someone like Beck. So their music was definitely not what was in vogue on the radio at the time. So there was just a lot of, things going against Metallica at this time. Also, just a little snippet, or little tidbit of information I find interesting. If anyone has ever watched or seen the cover of Alice in Chains' MTV Unplugged album, you'll see their bass player, Mike Inez, has friends don't let friends get haircuts, or something like that written on his bass. Metallica was in the audience. Now, the Alice in Chains Unplugged album was recorded a couple of months before Load came out and before Metallica's Load promo cycle started. So Alice in Chains got a sneak peek of the newly cut hair of Metallica. They didn't have long hair anymore. How are they going to be Metallica without long hair? So that is why you see that in the Alice in Chains MTV Unplugged performance. I guess one of the biggest criticisms of Load, and hopefully I'll be able to disprove this, people who hated it said they all of a sudden went blues rock or blues metal, allegedly. We'll try to get into that later. So our guest tonight that I will bring on shortly to fight me on this is Dustin Bingaman. Dustin is the drummer of local metal band Crypt Seeker. And he is also, I'm going to completely reduce who he is as a person to being a metal dad. Now, that's not an insult because, as I'll say in a second, that's kind of what I want to consider myself at this point. So before we bring on Dustin, aka fellow metal dad, let's listen to a brief excerpt from Crypt Seeker. This is from their 1999 album, 2019 album, and the song is called Torrential Ecstasy. All right, here we go. All right. Dustin, how are we doing today?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm all right. And by the way, sorry, how are we doing tonight? It's tonight is when this is going on.
It's
All right.
dark outside.
Yeah, exactly. We are going to be talking about Metallica tonight, and specifically Metallica's Load. So what's your history with Metallica? How do you feel about them?
Okay, so I think universally most metal guys would adopt the first four albums as the core, the structure of what is thrash metal. Obviously, there are tons and tons of bands that are not in the big four, but it's undeniable, like you said. Even if you don't like metal, you know who Metallica is, and for me, growing up out in Brown County, Ohio, I didn't have a whole lot of access to metal or just alternative music. And I first heard Metallica on WBN. They used to do mandatory Metallica.
Yes.
Tune in.
Yeah.
Listen to that hour long, and it got shorter over the years, and that was a bummer. But I always really liked it, and even the albums that I don't necessarily enjoy now, such as the Black Album, I think that's probably most people in our age range is at least not, if not their entire introduction, a big part of it. But yeah, I like the band. Don't necessarily like Load, and we'll discuss that. I revisited it recently to make sure I still felt the same, and it might be a stronger feeling now.
No. Okay, well, we haven't had our conversation yet. We will work on that.
I will say that my favorite thing about Metallica is that when I was a kid, I used to think the song Sad But True was actually called Sad Patrol, and I stand by it being a better song that way.
Emo Metallica, Sad Patrol. When the promo cycle for Load started up, before you heard a song, and it was a different time. Maybe we didn't even know they were recording an album until the first single dropped. But what were your expectations? What were you hoping for from them after the Black Album?
So honestly, like right around that promo cycle would have kind of been when I started kind of actively seeking out heavier music in
Same here.
general. I was
Yeah.
8 when that happened, and I like that you mentioned Not a Surf actually, because in '96 I was probably listening to that, and you failed to mention the best album that came out in '96, which was Weezer Pinkerton, and
Oh, we had to discuss Weezer's Red album for this show. So, man. Yeah, Pinkerton. You're right. I can't believe I did that. Wow.
so that's probably what I was listening to more of at the time, as well as plenty of just radio pop music, because I didn't really know anything all that well outside of country music, just growing up where I grew up and what my family listened to. So
Yeah,
that would have
same here.
been when I first started discovering music that I found on my own, outside of a Polaris tape that I got from a cereal box with a Pete and Pete promo.
Heck yeah.
uh, so I was discovering heavier music, but I do remember thinking that Metallica sounds different. I
Okay.
remember Alice in Chains being a very big presence in my life,
Mm-hmm.
and the whole unplugged thing, the MTV news cycle made that
Yeah.
such a thing. it
Oh,
was
man.
it was a battle of the long hairs, and I don't know that I knew what to expect, but I knew that it wasn't going to be Metallica as we knew them.
Right. So then the first single that they released was Until It Sleeps, and a big video rollout on MTV. So you finally got to hear Until It Sleeps, and you said what? And remember, we got to keep this relatively clean for the library show.
I honestly don't know that that was the first single I consciously remember.
Oh, okay, okay.
I do. I mean, I remember that era specifically, like music videos being so iconic, and especially Metallica pulling off some pretty big feats in the music video world. But I think the single that I remember most vividly from the time is King Nothing.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah.
And to me, I will say that I can stand by your side in the fight against this not being a blues metal album. I think it was Metallica's answer to grunge,
Yeah,
but a couple years too late.
yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
So I just remember thinking, oh, this is like other bands that I like, but not as good.
Man, their singer and rhythm guitar player and main songwriter, James Hetfield, really steps up his yeah game on this album. I mean, he's known for his constant yeahs. And oh, by the way, if anyone's not familiar, you might want to stick around until the very, very, very end of this episode because there just might be an Easter egg involved with James Hetfield and his yeahs. So if you're not experienced, stick around with that. So I could kind of see it maybe from his vocals more than I could anything else. But
That's I think too. You could argue that the Black Album saw a little bit more of that, but Load is when he fully committed to the new vocal styling, and
boy, did he yarl on this album. I mean, he puts Creed from Scott Stapp, or Creed from Scott Stapp from Creed to shame on this album. And I'm gonna go ahead and say, if there's one thing, if you end up criticizing the vocals and how he pronounces words on this, I don't know if I will be able to fight back on that one. But so, all right, so jump into it. What did you think about this album?
so one thing that I do recall from the promo cycle, and as well as just albums of that era, is everyone posted run times on the albums. You knew how long every song was gonna be before you even popped it in. And
Yeah.
I don't know if that was a marketing thing to be like, look how much you're getting for the dollar spent. Like, this is how long of an album you're getting. I don't know what that was, but I do remember them really laying it on heavy that that album was whatever the max you can fit on a CD without the audio quality, really degrading further. Uh, that was what they did. They actually, and I did some research on the old Wikipedia,
Actually, a
and
very reliable source, completely honestly. Yeah, yeah.
they talked about how they actually had to trim some jammy parts back to actually hit that runtime. And I don't know why they were so proud of it, because the first thought is this is an undertaking to listen to this thing front to back. There's no denying that Metallica has a pop sensibility about
Oh,
their songwriting,
100%.
and that's a big part of this shift in this album cycle as well. But they, you know, if they would have fit the pop song runtime as well,
Yeah.
I think this album would be far more enjoyable
Yeah.
on my end.
Yeah.
Um,
I could chop off a lot of time of the songs, and there's probably a couple that I think I could do without. I mean, if you do that, you're getting there. You bring up an interesting thing about pop structures. You know, to my parents at least, a few generations ago, like when the satanic panic was going on of the 80s, like metal bands, Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, laughable now, but back then they were seen as just scary, abrasive, screamy music. But you hit right on it. All the big four thrash bands, which were Anthrax, Metallica, Megadeth, and Slayer, they all did verses and choruses.
yeah,
And so it was always a pop structure, just really, in some cases, poorly recorded and played really fast.
yeah,
So, yeah,
absolutely.
I don't
It's
know.
just I think Metallica, unlike the rest in the big four, captured the melodic
Yes.
vocal while still feeling aggressive. You
Yeah.
know, and I think that's probably the birthplace of the Yaz. Is this I wanna be I still want to sound aggressive, but I know that I'm singing catchy songs.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you say, I mean, Metallica really nailed that. Well, I have a couple of thoughts that I was going to lead into on the album in a second. What else? Do you have anything else you really want to say about it, or do you want to respond
I'll
to.
respond because I think some of your questions might lead down the same path of where I'm going.
Okay. What if you. Okay. And this is to anyone who hates Load, anyone who hates the Black Album and hates Load. What if instead of listening to this album in the sense of this album was written for me, I have to like everything that Metallica did, what if you saw Metallica as moving into becoming the best gateway band that ever existed? Like, as I mentioned before, I really like, death metal and grindcore. But if the first thing I had ever heard was Napalm Death or, Cannibal Corpse or something like that, there's probably no way that I would have jumped right into it and been ready to go for that. Whereas I heard bands like Metallica and Megadeth that were heavy but not screamy. And then, some people choose to stick with the melodic side of things. Some people choose to move on and find more and more aggressive stuff. And I think it is very important for radio rock to have really good gateway bands to usher people into heavier stuff if they choose to.
Maybe that album was to be the median, the gateway. This is how you transition into this other music portal. But and even if that was their thought going into it, I blame that album for all the bands that follow
Uh,
that are still played on the same radio stations, sounding like a copy of that.
yeah.
And when you save a JPEG too many times, and that's how we end up with 3 Days Grace. That's how we got here.
I don't know who that is, and I don't care to find out. Um, but
It's bad.
okay, I'll trust you on that. You mean it's not for you? That's what you
It's
mean,
not. It's
right?
not for me, and I think it's a direct result of Load.
That's a really, really, really good point. Um, I'm not sure if I have a proper retort for that. Do you blame Faith No More for Limp Bizkit?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh, you didn't even have to think about it. All right.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody ever heard, and I know this is like the worst example of Faith No More as a band, as a Mike Patton fan in general, but if anybody's ever heard the song Epic, it's not really hard to draw the line to all of the other things we had to live through. And
True, but would you rather live without ever having heard Epic?
oh no, I'm fine with new metal as a whole
Oh, okay.
existing. I even enjoy some of it, not even as a guilty pleasure, just actively enjoy a chunk of it.
Are you
So
excited about the new Seven Dust coming out?
I'm that was not under the category of things that I enjoy.
Well, then we'll stop there before I embarrass myself. I don't like it either. So you clearly would have been happier if Metallica had come back and done a thrash album, right?
Yes, in theory. In
In
theory.
yeah,
But
of totally in theory. Yeah, I know it's hard to recapture that, but that's where you would have wanted them to go.
as
I
they've
think.
revisited thrash in their later career, I think it's evident that I didn't want that after the Black album, but
Oh, you already cut off something that I was going to say then. That's what I was really hoping you were going to say, that you really liked the latter day stuff when they got heavy again. But all right.
there's
So,
some riffs on Death Magnetic. I saw them on that tour, and the tour ruled.
well, a Metallica tour is always going to rule. Doesn't matter what album they're touring on.
But there are some riffs on there. But that you can't forgive Stanger because there are some riffs on Death Magnetic.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. So where I was going to go with that was, a lot of people are like, I didn't like Load, I didn't like Reload, I didn't like Saint Anger, which let's not even go there. That's just too easy of a target to talk about Saint Anger. Although Some Kind of Monster is probably my favorite movie of all time.
It is phenomenal. If there's anything that came out of like good that came out of that entire era, it's that documentary, and it is incredible. I recommend anyone who has not seen it watch it. You don't have to be a Metallica fan
No.
to know that that whole process was insufferable and
Yeah.
like a good insight onto how these gigantic bands operate.
Yeah, I can't. I agree with that completely. All you have to do is have just a passing interest in music, and you will be riveted through that documentary. Now, if you are a Metallica fan, you will find some parts funny that other people won't. But what I was going to go with on this was, I think the people that are really, 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 really just want them to stay thrashy, so they didn't like Load because they wanted a thrash band, they were listening to the wrong band by that point. Like, Metallica has earned the right to do what they want to do in some ways. Like, one of the albums that I've listened to for this show is U2's Pop. And I think, I didn't enjoy it. I don't think many people did. But after a certain point, I think you earn the right to kind of do what you want to do. And some people follow you and some people don't.
Does
But
that album have Staring at the Sun on it? Is that what that
yeah,
song's?
yeah.
Okay, I'll say this, not a U2 fan. I've enjoyed Joshua Tree in passing. Staring at the Sun's a good song. Pop is like, I would go Joshua Tree Pop, and I know that is not a popular opinion.
This whole conversation is going to derail. I'm going to have to, I don't know how I'm going to not talk about anything you just said right now, but Metallica. All right, metal. Let's get this back. I'm going to lose it here. For the people that were wanting thrash by then, I think, I don't know why people weren't listening to Megadeth. I mean, yeah, around this time, Megadeth was experimenting too, and they put out a really, really terrible album. But Megadeth really righted the course. Metallica just kept going with different stuff. They never really got it back for a long, long time. Whereas a band like Megadeth was putting out thrash albums that people just ignored. That, I will admit, yes, I'm more of a Megadeth person than I am Metallica. So maybe can't see clearly here. But a couple of the albums that Megadeth put out around 2005, 2006, 2007, around that time, 2004 even, with The System Has Failed. If Metallica had released any of those albums, they would have been massive and people would have been like, oh, it's a return to form. This is as good as anything they ever did. So I'm kind of like, you know what? Metallica doesn't have to give you any more of that stuff. You have other bands that are really good at that and they're still doing it. So it's just it's just not who Metallica is anymore. And I don't know.
Do you think of it as, I kind of view it as Metallica at this point is an institution, and
Yes.
you're no longer speaking on behalf of just metal fans, and I kind of view Metallica like a professional sports team. And the people that continuously complain every time a new album comes out and they're like, I wish they would go back. I mean, it's been how many decades since they put out like a proper thrash album, and it's just like the same people who watch football every Sunday, even though their team hasn't won, a championship in decades.
Yeah.
They still complain about it and they still watch it and they still absorb it, because at this point, it's not even just a thing that they like in passing. It's an institution and it's a part of their lives.
Yeah.
So I think that no matter what Metallica does, even if they re-recorded Master of Puppets and like tweaked it and re-released it as a new thing, people would be like, I like old Metallica. I wish they would go back to that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I think they're just too big. They're never going to please their entire fan base, no matter what they do.
Yeah. No, that's totally fair. And, even though I get frustrated over the Megadeth versus Metallica thing, I really do feel for Metallica on that. I really, really do. Which is why, even though all the hype over, what was their last album, Hardwired or something like that. I mean, I listened to it, something like that, yeah. I definitely listened to it a couple of times, and I was like, yes, this is thrashier than they've been, but I'm still like, again, I know I'm locked into this. If Megadeth or Testament or Exodus, any of the other thrash bands around that time, if they put out Hardwired to Self-Destruct, people would be like, meh, it's a thrash album. But this was like a return to form for Metallica, and I'm like, I don't know, was it?
And I think that's just the both ends of the spectrum. For the other bands, the bar is so high that would be like, no, it's fine. But for Metallica, the bar is so low that if they do anything resembling thrash, everybody's like, they've done it. They've done it again.
Usually when a guest picks one, I ask them to pick what's a good introduction to this album. And I think your introduction would be to not listen to it. So I'm going to throw what I think would be good introductions. So I think if you are a Black Album fan, and that's your jam, you like Black Album Metallica, but you never listen to Load, I think you should start with the first single, Until It Sleeps, because it's got a kind of a pretty echoey, spacey verse and then a somewhat heavy chorus. So I think it is a good jumping in point to you. And I didn't know if you may or may not even have an opinion on Until It Sleeps or that assessment.
I think rather than saying if you're a fan of the Black Album, because I think we've missed a very important entry point to Metallica here, and that is S&M.
Oh, yeah. S&M, where they did, it was Symphony and Metallica. Was it the San Francisco Orchestra?
Sure, that sounds right. That feels good.
Yeah. They did a lot of their hits backed by an orchestra, massive orchestra.
And I think a lot of people would say that's their favorite Metallica album. There are those
You're totally right.
That's their entry point, and having that huge symphony behind them really, proves that Metallica is rooted in, especially Kirk Hammett with his love of classical music, is rooted in structuring songs that way, and how well they can write a song. But also, I think that first single off of Load would be a great entry point for those fans as well. I'm not saying you're wrong with the Black Album thing, but also saying if that's your jam, that's probably a good spot to start.
That is a 100% fantastic point, and I do think it is a better fit than saying the Black Album. I agree with that totally. Hey, side note, by the way, a couple of weeks ago, they put out the sequel to S&M 2, and they did another symphonic recording, and in the week that it dropped, Katy Perry put out a new album, and it outsold the new Katy Perry album. So
good.
That's how, that's how big Metallica is. And my other thing I was going to say, how would I try to sell this to someone who liked everything before the Black Album and nothing else? And I'm not sure there's a way to do it. I would say the two most aggressive songs, the first song on the album, which is a title, we're trying to keep things clean here. I wouldn't say the title here, but the very first track is a little bit faster. And then there's one called Wasting My Hate, which in some ways is, man, I don't think anyone listens to thrash bands for the lyrics. No, Megadeth, Slayer, any of that stuff. No one listens to thrash bands for the lyrics, I don't think. The lyrics are a little, how old was he when he put this out? I don't know, but it's like a kind of a teenage level.
Yeah,
lyrics.
and I don't know that. I'm sure there are some people that have quoted Metallica in their wedding vows, but I don't know that that's the appeal of the band.
No. But yeah, I think Wasting My Hate would be a nice aggressive song on this one. Well, unfortunately, I'm looking at the time. I'm going to have to cut off one thing a little short. Dustin had recommended that everyone read Closer You Are by Robert Pollard of the Ohio band. They're not an Ohio band at this point, but they're from Ohio. Guided by Voices. So, just a little bit, just a sentence or two about the book for people who are...
Um, Man, I should have prepared. There's a reason why my job description is not write the synopsis for anything. But if you like reading about musicians in any capacity, Robert Pollard's just a fascinating guy with over 100 albums under his belt.
Yeah.
And from Dayton, Ohio, and just a fascinating look into how this guy operates and how he continuously puts out album after album. And I really like the stuff from the 90s, and again, some of it's not my favorite, but I think there's something in there for everyone.
Yep.
And there's a lot of changes, and it just a fascinating guy to read about that's close enough to being a hometown hero. Highly recommend.
Absolutely. All right, well, with that, I am going to let you have your evening back. Thanks for giving us some of your time. Everybody go and check out Crypt Seeker and listen to Metallica. And thanks so much, Dustin.
Thank you so much, Kent. This was great. It was a blast.
All right, thanks a lot. Talk to you
See ya.
soon. All right, everybody. Thanks again for joining us for My Favorite Album is Terrible. And again, thanks to Dustin so much for his valuable time. Look in the comments for everything that we talked about, even some of the tangents that we went off on. I'm going to try to find some stuff to add to the links there if you want to check out any of this stuff. Look in the comments. Give us a like. Give us a share if you enjoyed the episode tonight. Share it with any music fans. I really, really, really want people to jump in and, have a back and forth with us while these things are going on. So help us share it. Join us 2 Thursdays from now at 8 o'clock for the next episode, and you can look in the comments for the big unveil of what album and what guest we are going to have for that one. And that is going to be it for tonight. Once again, thank you so much, and I'll see you a couple of Thursdays from now at 8 o'clock. Thanks.